You fast forward and maybe that person started off on that trajectory at 20 and now in their mid 50s, because I've coached people of all these different age ranges, I was watching, where this person's midlife crisis and why they're so deeply unfulfilled and they have a life that they actually hate, even though it looks perfect on the outside. It's the perfect Instagram or LinkedIn story and they hate it. And why? Because it hasn't been them, because they haven't enjoyed it. They weren't even aware that they weren't enjoying it because they were taught and trained and really indoctrinated and maybe really successful at getting a bunch of stuff to happen in the world. But is it stuff that actually moves the needle? Is it stuff that helps us forward as a planet? Is it stuff that they actually care about? Or was it stuff that they did to impress others?
Right.
So it's not an inaction. The allow is actually drop into the center of you and make sure that you move kind of in an integrated way then, moving forward with all of the parts of you so that you can be the powerhouse. Because I feel like that's what drops us into that unlimited power. It's unlimited.
Yeah.
The forces that are there when we get in alignment are massive.
Yeah. Welcome. I'm Brian Gates, and this is TruLeaderSHiFT. Our mission is to expand awareness of what's possible in life and in business. I created this show to introduce you to business leaders and life hackers so that you can learn about the pivotal moments in their lives that shifted their perspective on what it means to be successful. So my next guest is Amy Albright. She's a great friend of mine and has been a mentor of mine for 5+ years, 5 years and a couple of weeks, actually. We just had our 5-year anniversary of our first session together. She has been pivotal in my journey and in my transformation over the last 5 years. We've had a lot of fun together. She's supported me in so many ways. My transformational story really starts right when I met Amy. I was going through a pretty difficult time in my life. I was very unconscious to the world. I realized that the last 15 years had just passed me by. And wouldn't you know it, perfectly, we came together and I was matched with her as an executive coach at the time. And she really, really supported me and helped me open my eyes and make me more aware in the world. And then she guided me along that way because with that journey came some big transformations in my life that were very difficult. And she was there and supported me and taught me how to slow down in life so that I could notice what's actually happening around me. And ever since then, it's been an awesome journey. We were together in a coaching relationship for about 2 years. She worked at the time as a consultant with Dave Asprey and Bulletproof in that organization. She decided to go in-house with them and work as part of their team for a while. So we separated for a few years. And then once she went back out on her own doing her thing, we reconnected. And that was about 2 years ago that we reconnected. So it's been an awesome journey. She's taught me a lot, and I consider her my top mentor along the way. So I'm excited for you to get to know her. And I welcome Amy Albright. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you sitting here with me on this show because we've sat in this way so many times.
It's true.
For how many hours, right, over the last 5 years.
It's true.
It's just a lot of fun. So, I've talked a little bit now about how you've helped me. We can get more into that, but you have an incredible vision for the world.
Yeah.
And you've shared that with me along the way, and it's continuing to evolve as well of what you're doing to make that vision come alive. And so share a little bit about your vision.
So I guess I can tell the story from an individual because we just started there with you. When we first met, you weren't really too sure who you were, and you were doing a really big job inside of a big and an amazing organization, $2 billion organization. Fantastic. And yet you hadn't even scratched the surface of who you were, and you weren't even beginning to access your full power and your bandwidth and to be able to live in your true calling and really just unleash yourself. So what I see is the capacity, essentially it's one person at a time, no matter how many people I'm working with, to unlock and unleash that inside of people where they get to live in a really free and unlimited way where they get to be connected with their hearts and also just kicking ass in business, having a lot of fun in life, and really being alive. So when we put that together in a collective, when we really look at, millions of people living that way, everybody understanding that they are inherently a leader. This isn't an exclusive club, and it doesn't matter what your rank is or what it is you do with your time. So if everybody understands that they're a leader and everybody's unleashed and unlocked and really living from their hearts very powerfully, then what we can possibly see at a global scale is it's incredible.
Absolutely.
It is incredible. It melts down the walls. So much of what it is that we deal with, there's the overt conflict that we see, let's say between whatever it is, heads of state and nations. It could be conflict that's subtle between two spouses, the subtle bickering or whatever that goes on. All of that conflict can really drop away when people are living in that fully expressed, truthful freedom from a perspective of freedom. We don't have to have that sort of reality. And I know that can sound very fanciful, but it's really what's already happening. A lot of the work that I've done, yes, I did do, I have to cleverly disguise myself sometimes under the term executive coach because sometimes people don't understand. Basically, I'm just a problem solver. That's why I call myself a game changer. I feel like it better describes what it is that I'm up to. But, a lot of what I'm doing behind the scenes in the last 10, 17 years, whatever, if you want to look at it, is working with people that are putting together businesses with environmental groups, with, people that live indigenously to the land, with, sometimes underserved populations that are parts of our active communities. And what we're seeing is solutions that can come for all of them. But it takes really evolved leaders. It takes really awake and aware people to be able to pull that off and to be able to do it in a way that's not just fiscally and environmentally, socially responsible, but in a way that is proactively groundbreaking, creating new paradigms and new realities, and also being extremely financially lucrative and beyond win-win. This isn't a bleeding heart thing. This is a real, how can we all be in our power? How can we all really get what it is we most want and need, including service to the planet, including service to those that don't have voices? What's possible, I think, is just about everything and anything.
Yeah.
And I think the time's now.
Yeah, and you are the right person to be pushing this forward and unleashing that potential and the power within all these individuals and all these leaders. Because, the gifts that you have are unbelievable. I've said this to many people I sit with you for 60 to 90 minutes, and the amount that we accomplish is unbelievable because I don't need to give you any backstory of what's going on. You're already tuned in and you get it. It speaks to a little bit of your gifts. You have many gifts, but that's what I see and feel the most is you. I mentioned somebody who you've never met, who I've never mentioned before, and you get them, you understand them.
Yeah.
And you already know really their wiring. So you get to coach me and let me know how to best interact and effectively communicate with them. And now you do work with bigger groups, and you're continuing to work with bigger and bigger groups and bringing your gifts into being able to help and support people in that way and really help them realize their own potential and power. And that's been incredible. My journey with your support has been incredible, going from really just in my head, always doing, going so fast and burning out and then resting and then burning out and all of that, to really just stopping and enjoying life and being present to life and really being present to all the information that I have access to.
Right.
Now that I now have access to, thanks to your help to help me harness my own gifts and be a great leader. So I'm excited to see what you continue to create in the world. So talk a little bit about how are you working with people now going forward? How are you working with groups? What is your vision? What is your strategy for that?
Yeah. So I still do work one-on-one. There's just nothing that can replace that for me. I love the connection time with just one person and being able to look really deeply into their world and develop that particular individual quite, take them as far as they can go. And I choose who I work with very strategically. I look for the people that can make the biggest change. I see my clients not as opportunities for business, but for opportunities for global change. So I really want to make sure that I'm investing my time and putting my power behind the right people, people with the right hearts and minds, and people with the right kinds of skills and talents. Ultimately, my gut tells me who I should work with. So that's who I'm choosing to work with on an individual level. But there are only so many people I can work with in that format. So that's, over the years, I've done different kinds of things, but I am going to be coming back around into working with larger groups, both in person and probably online as well, just so that I can really be inclusive rather than exclusive to people that can fly and find the time to travel and all of that. So I'm really enjoying getting back into that and being able to work with groups again. It's really fun. I love to sit and, again, like you said, with very little information, I just get a ton of insight, and I love to do that, and to do that with a group so that people can learn. Because what I've known for a long time now, again, I've been at this 17 years. One of the things I learned right away is, whoa, wait a minute, we're all dealing with the same stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's a stay-at-home mom or if it's the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. We might look different on the outside. We might have different genders. We might have different roles. We all have the same fears.
We're all messed up.
We're all sort of beautifully imperfect.
Right. Well put. All right. More delicately put. Yeah.
Yeah. And so being able to see what's inside of someone, to look really, I think maybe a way to describe it is I can kind of see deeply into their soul, figure out who they are, what they're supposed to be doing, what it is they most need to hear, and relay that to them really quickly so that they can get a whole nother perspective, get much more free, and then be able to move forward and actually have an action plan. Because what really limits us isn't our knowing how to do something. It's the belief structures that are existing behind the scenes.
Yeah, and that's one thing that you've helped me with, and I love your philosophy on, because you had said just kind of allowing, and you work with the clients that you're kind of just told to work with, and that's counter to a lot of the content that's out there right now of just go, work your butt off, and push, right?
Right.
Because you're very big on, and this is how you live your life, and what you've coached me on, of just allowing.
Right.
Just allowing and not pushing, not doing, just being, and you're going to attract these great things into your life, whether it's a certain business partner, whether it's putting together a team, whether it's feeling into what you really should be doing and what's your purpose in life.
Right.
It's really fascinating, because I've struggled, as you know, with this along the way, and I think probably we all do, but it's a tough thing to be in a place where, okay, I know that I need to accomplish this. Say, at one point I needed to build a team. And I thought that I need to go out there, and I need to be meeting people, I need to figure this out, I need to, work really hard to try to build this team. And what you coached me on was, no, stop. What you should be doing right now, you should go surfing, and you should go do some yoga. And that's what you should be doing right now in order to attract this team, and they will just come to you. And when you say that, it's scary. It sounds great, but it's like, will that really work? And all this anxiety and this kind of fear comes up and gets in my way sometimes. But and then as I'm able to do that, it just all kind of comes into place.
Right. Yeah. And so the coaching or the advice can be really different depending on the person and depending on the moment. So in those moments, if I'm saying stop everything, allow, and I want you to go surf and let this go, it's probably because you're gripping the wheel too hard. You're trying to force it to happen. And forcing is working against the laws of nature, let's just say. So the first thing to do is drop into a more expansive state, to get out of the illusion and stop the forgetting of who you are and drop right into the middle of who you are. Because that's how you'll attract the right team. It's not really about getting action to happen. It's about getting right action to happen. Yes. Work smarter, not harder. Get off the hamster wheel and out of the fear. And then suddenly we end up the path parts for us. So it's not inaction. It's not allow, just meditate, be a monk in a cave somewhere and some good stuff will happen for you somehow, right? You'll do everything you're supposed to do in the world. But if we're off, I call it offline or just a little off kilter, it can be massive. And then everything that we do from there essentially we can just continue to pull ourselves off path, and then lend to that collapse. So like you're saying before, a lot of people basically work really, really hard because that's what we were told to do. That's the programming. And it also is what is driven by that I'm not good enough, right? The I'm not good enough story, or I'm not lovable, or whatever it is that runs most people's show, has them pushing too hard and not being that productive, or at the very least being productive in ways that they actually don't give a shit about and that they don't really love. And then, you fast forward and maybe that person started off on that trajectory at 20 and now in their mid 50s, because I've coached people of all these different age ranges, I was watching, where this person's midlife crisis and why they're so deeply unfulfilled and they have a life that they actually hate, even though it looks perfect on the outside. It's the perfect Instagram or LinkedIn story, and they hate it. And why? Because it hasn't been them. Because they haven't enjoyed it. They weren't even aware that they weren't enjoying it because they were taught and trained and really indoctrinated and maybe really successful at getting a bunch of stuff to happen in the world. But is it stuff that actually moves the needle? Is it stuff that helps us forward as a planet? Is it stuff that they actually care about?
Right.
Or was it stuff that they did to impress others?
Right.
So it's not an inaction. The allow is actually drop into the center of you and make sure that you move kind of in an integrated way, then moving forward with all of the parts of you so that you can be the powerhouse. Because I feel like that's what drops us into that unlimited power. It's unlimited.
Yeah.
The forces that are there when we get in alignment are massive.
Yeah. I mean, the ability to live into your full potential by living from that space, by slowing down, by being present, and just being aware and conscious of things that are coming at you, the information that's coming through. If you have a task list of things to do and certain things on that list just make you very anxious, there's something telling you there's a lot of resistance against doing that. Listening to that, okay, well, let's listen to that. Don't just push through that resistance.
Right.
There's a message in there. Maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe it's taking you the wrong direction. Maybe it's for the wrong reasons. Maybe it's to please other people, right?
Right.
Prove to your mother or your father that you're good enough, right?
Right.
The old stories recreate as a kid.
Totally.
Yeah, coming back to that.
Totally. Or maybe it's the wrong day or the wrong time. Or maybe the project needs to be adjusted 30 degrees to the right, and then it locks in.
Yeah.
But if we just run over those signs and symptoms, if we were to run around on a sprained ankle, there's pain there. And the pain is there to say, hey, don't run around on this. When we experience pain, it's time to stop. The thing is that most of us are taught that pain is normal. We should be having severe amounts of emotional or spiritual or whatever pain because that's life. But that's a lie.
Yeah.
That's a lie. So the pain means something. Slow down, figure out what it is. And if it is, oh, wow, I'm just terrified of this, but everything is actually aligned, then do it.
Yeah.
Right? Jump in.
Yeah.
Swan dive into it. Get over it.
But don't suffer for the sake of suffering.
Exactly. Because that suffering can continue. If you handle the fear and you handle it in a really clean, tidy, and fast way, now you're on to the next thing. Conquer the next big mountain.
Being aligned with your vision, kind of what you said of if it's the right path, even though it seems painful, if it's getting you in the right direction, if it's the right thing to do and you're very clear on that, it's going to be uncomfortable. That's okay. Push forward on that. But just make sure that it's aligned with your vision.
Yeah.
And what you're trying to ultimately accomplish.
Yeah. Similar to working out, we don't want to work out to the point where we collapse, right? Physically. So we want to be pushing an edge. We want to be working. Maybe we add a little extra mileage, or we try to do something faster, or add a little more weight to the stack of weights, or whatever it is. But we don't do massive things that are outside of our growth pattern with that. And same thing with anything else that we're growing into. Yeah, we need to be working an edge. The flow state, which is, it's possible and achievable for everybody. The flow state is available when we're working an edge. I think the thing that happens is people are either grinding on all their gears and they're way past, they're way out over their edge and not handling it, or they're way dropped back and they're just living inside of a safe zone. So they're kind of numb. And, the zombie apocalypse kind of idea, like the real zombie problem. And I think the metaphor that's there is people are just sort of dead and they're not working an edge.
Yeah.
And they're not waking up every day and saying, what kind of a miracle can I create? What's new for me today?
That's fascinating because it feels like there's a lot of people on each end of the spectrum, either zombie apocalypse going through their life and just kind of in not flow state, but just a unconscious state. And then there's people that are pushing so hard. And the people that are on the pushing so hard point tend to be the leaders
Yep.
of organizations or just leaders in the world. And, bringing them back to that kind of that sweet spot,
Right.
so that they can really harness their gifts. I mean, these are the leaders of the world.
Yeah.
And if they're just pushing and doing all these things for the wrong reasons,
Right.
which a lot of us are, right? Humans are, that's what's putting us into kind of a dangerous place for society right now.
Yeah.
And what could be possible if we could shift how these leaders are leading in their lives and leading in the world to a place of really tuned in, tapped into what's right, tuned into their true gifts, and being able to fully use that creativity that they have access to if they can just drop back and slow down, put on the brakes a little bit, and check in every once in a while.
Yeah, it's like dropping back before you head into a turn and then you accelerate, right? We talked about that.
That was
our
very first session 5 years ago. Was exactly that. The motocross analogy you used for me because you knew I rode.
Yeah.
Braking prior to the turn.
Right.
And how much more efficient it is, how much less energy it takes, and how much more speed you actually create and gain through the process.
Absolutely. And it's just being fluid. So it's not less powerful. It's actually thinking about, I want to win the race, not I want to make it through this turn as fast as possible. Because if you go too fast through that turn, you can crash and burn. And then where are you? You've got to put back all the pieces. And that's what I see. A lot of really successful leaders that are doing massive things in the world are actually crashing and burning constantly. So when we drop it back a little bit and we know how to work with the flow and meter all of that, we really get optimization, and they drop into their genius, and they move from an entirely different place. The other thing that happens is the blinders drop off, and they're able to include more people. And that's one of the beautiful things, because they're already used to being in a leadership role. So being able to then lead from a whole new paradigm, it lights other people up. Even if the people that they're leading or that they're rubbing off on don't understand it, a lot of the times they're like, whoa, so-and-so's got a totally different mojo now. Have you noticed how cool, calm, and collected he or she is? And there's this whole nother, and now they're launching this whole program in the business, and everything's transforming, and they have no idea what's going on and what that leader's really up to. It doesn't have to be front-facing. But
So is it it's kind of a subconscious level that people pick up on this maybe?
absolutely.
So what's an example of that? Somebody you've worked with that's gone through that transition?
Yeah, one a CEO that I work with, it's kind of who I was just describing. He's got an incredible mojo about him now. He used to show up a little bit tight in the throat. He would, you could hear it in his voice. You could see it in his body. He was people pleasing. He wasn't very confident in certain ways. He was newly a CEO. And he was leading at a difficult time. He took the post at a difficult time, but yet nobody else necessarily knew that it was a difficult time. And so, there's just an incredible amount that has been unlocked. And everybody that meets him, whether it's, a stranger on the street, the person that he got his coffee from, somebody that he interacts with in a very small brief moment, and up to the senior leaders of his team or other massive CEOs that he interacts with at some of these events. Everybody's like, whoa, what is with that guy? And they're describing mojo. They're describing, we're animals, and we're taking in huge amounts of data all at the same time. And we're aware whether somebody else feels safe inside of their body or not. And we're taking cues just like gorillas do, or orangutans or whatever. I love to study how animals interact. It's very different than us, but it's actually all the same. We're mammals, and you can't fake that. It's real. It takes a huge amount of courage. That's one of the things that I definitely see and acknowledge with the people that do this kind of real deep dish work. It cannot be faked. This isn't paint a coat of happy over the top of your life and pretend everything's good.
Right.
This isn't just pretend to be confident or pretend that you don't have issues. Pretending is dangerous.
And it's really going in some cases, it's going into some very uncomfortable and even some suffering that you're going to incur along the way. But it's so, the payoff is unbelievable, right?
Yeah, it's massive.
And it is really interesting how, because I know it and I feel it with me, with my shift, and I have good days and bad days, right? So each day I get to see the difference of how I see the world and how I impact others with my state of being.
Yeah.
If I'm tuned in and have, just very present and going about my way with a very positive, high frequency, I attract that, right? I see the world in a beautiful way.
Right.
People are smiling back at me.
Yep.
The interaction I have at the coffee shop with people go out of their way to say hi, and we have a little interaction. Compared to the other days when I'm kind of closed off, and I feel like I see everybody else is in a bad mood too.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, or they spill your coffee or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole series of events that can go a different way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's so interesting. It's such a good indicator too of where I am, right? So now when I go about the world, if I'm seeing a lot of people in a negative place, if I tend to see a lot of people who are just complaining about things or not happy, I get to look at myself and say, why am I attracting that? What's going on with me that I'm attracting that into my world right now? And it's a huge indicator for me. It's like, all right, well, I probably need to go and slow down a little bit, check in with myself, whatever it is. Go surf, meditate, or just
get
take
back
a few
online.
Take a few breaths. I mean, sometimes it's just as easy as having a couple of breaths. Being grateful for whatever the world, just expressing some gratitude and appreciation, and it can turn around pretty quick.
Absolutely. Yeah, presence and gratitude can shift really quickly. The main thing is getting out of the being the victim or thinking of yourself as a victim. To some extent, if we're having a bad day and people aren't behaving the way that we want, and we're seeing victims around us, then that must be a piece of what we're living into. So being able to shift that and take full accountability. If you're experiencing it on some level, you're creating it. And when you really drop into that as not just a intellectual philosophy, but you own it, it's a courageous way of living. And because you've really embodied it. You've done such an amazing job.
And it's taking full responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough thing to do, right? Because, so I just witnessed a negative encounter with some people. So I created that in some way.
Yeah.
So what's going on with me? Big one for me early on was driving down the freeway and seeing somebody cut somebody off, and I used to get very worked up about that.
Yeah.
I had a lot of judgment for them, almost to the fact where I almost wanted to go and cut them off to teach them a lesson or something crazy like that, right? Yeah, it's realizing that, I'm judging that person. I must be judging myself for something similar, right?
Yeah.
If I did that, I would be judging myself and being really hard on myself, which is probably why I'm judging them. And that's what's coming up in me right now.
Yeah.
Anytime we judge others, we're judging ourselves for either that exact thing or something that's triggering that for us.
Totally.
And that can be a tough thing too, right? Because now you're taking responsibility for a lot, right?
Yeah.
But taking that responsibility, you have the power to shift it.
Totally.
Right?
And unconditionally love yourself and the other person, whether it's the person that cut someone off or whoever else you think is doing something wrong in the world.
Yeah.
Just unconditionally love them. Love is a really powerful force. And again, this could sound like some fluffy woo-woo crap, but I think if we're going to have the most powerful force that exists, then maybe we should pay attention to it and utilize it fully. So it's, again, not sit around in a bliss bubble and pretend everything's good, but holy crap, this is coming up for me in real time. I'm on the freeway and I'm pissed off right now. Okay, so rather than being pissed off at that person and then feeling bad for the victim that they cut off, do you realize how many parallels and analogies there are with this, right?
Right.
So it's what about if we just shift that paradigm, and right now I love myself for the fact that all that anger came up, and not have to make myself right. Maybe what is it that I'm not feeling good enough about that I have to be better than someone else right now?
And get excited about the opportunity to dig into that and understand it and break through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that other person didn't even know they were cutting someone off.
Right.
Maybe they did, and they have a belief about that, whatever it is, right? But can we just give up the story on that for a half a second? Because ultimately, if someone chooses to live inside of that, that's their own jail cell. They're not driving in a car, they're driving inside of bars or walls. And that's a perspective and a reality that's actually, it just limits freedom. We could say it's a dogged pursuit of freedom, the truth that gets us there. So the truth of it is it doesn't really matter exactly what just happened. What matters is what's happening inside of us. Earlier when you were describing, I love that, the polarity between, the people that push really hard and, kind of that traditional leadership where they burn out and they push really hard and they overwork and they do it all for other people and they care so much what other people think. And then there's the people on the other side of that are in rebellion of that, right? But what happens is that those people have secret things that happen inside of their minds and in their interactions where they actually judge the shit out of each other. And they use so much of their energy making themselves not the other person, or wondering and blaming themselves for not being more like that or whatever it is. So when we take and we clear out, for instance, all of the real estate inside of someone's being about that push-pull, whether it's the drivers on the freeway or the people that don't work hard enough. How come nobody but me works so hard? You know, the perfect martyr story. It's like if you give up being a martyr, you actually have more bandwidth and you'll get more done. And also if you give up the idea of I'll just be a zombie, I'll eat really crappy food so that I feel kind of numb, I'll do really numbing things, I'll get another dopamine hit off of my smartphone right now, rather than actually engaging, rather than actually dropping into my life and maybe making myself work a whole bunch of edges that I haven't ever worked before because I've just been disengaged. You know, if we can get those people, rather than saying, be the opposite, my encouragement is be who you are, be in the truth, and do whatever you've got to do to burn through whatever it is that's holding you back so that you can get to that truth, that real balance point, that real alignment within oneself. And then when you're there, that's freedom. And you know when you're there because it feels good. You're not in pain anymore. And when it starts to feel good, it can feel really, really good. And it can be that flow state. And flow is a high. You want a new drug, you want a new thing to chase. I mean, that's the perfect thing. For people with really big appetites, chase flow. And you can't get there when you're pissed off or having an argument, even in your own mind.
Well, so talk about flow because, I mean, you could also be in a flow activity. So do you think flow is good no matter what? You could be in a flow activity that is in something that is not productive for you at all, or do you say that flow is always productive for you?
If you're in a flow, it's probably productive for you, most likely, even if it looks non-productive, because what is productivity, right? So, you know, maybe like when we look at children's education, isn't art important? Well, you know, some people would say, well, it's not going to get them anywhere in their real job. It's like, yes, it will. It's going to teach them innovation, creativity, and how to drop into flow, right? And dropping into flow is where the genius lies.
Okay.
So they could hide, you know, people can hide in activities and kind of swirl around inside of things that maybe don't move them forward, but probably they'll lose the flow. They'll probably lose that creative edge, and they're not going to have that same rush. They'll be hiding inside of it. So it's not about the activity per se. It's about the actual biology.
That makes sense, because if you're doing something that puts you in a flow activity, you know, what could that be? I mean, maybe it's just creating a certain spreadsheet, right? Like you're at the office and you get in this spreadsheet and you're really honing this spreadsheet, and you're in flow state because that's your thing, which, you know, I've been in that before. Yeah. And sometimes you can get to a point where you're doing it really to avoid doing some other things.
Right.
But that doesn't last very long. Because that knowing that you're doing this to avoid pulls you out of that flow state, and you become aware of, all right, this doesn't feel right. Something's going on.
Exactly. So it's different than geeking out on and falling down a wormhole. Like you can end up on a web search or a spreadsheet or doing some activity.
Or streaming your news feed.
Yeah, exactly.
You can feel like you're in a flow activity just streaming your news. I mean, you're somewhere because you're not freaking conscious, and all of a sudden 45 minutes has gone by and you look at the clock and your eyes are bugging out because you've been looking at your phone for that long. And
exactly. And you feel dissociated. You feel disconnected from yourself. So you've not been in flow. You've been sucked in. You've been hypnotized, you know, by something. Yeah. And that's a different thing. That's part of that addictive, you know, negative addictive behavior, right? With flow state, maybe let's say you do, sometimes I'll just feel really inspired to check my Instagram feed. Right? I don't know why, but I just get that feeling. I'm on there when I get that feeling for probably 2 minutes tops. Scroll. It's like I'm not even looking at it. I'm finding the thing that I knew I was on there for. Boom, I got it. I read the message. I turn off the Instagram. Right? So that's Instagram consumption done one way that is productive. There's more ways than that. But if you find yourself, you know, an hour in and down multiple wormholes and you kind of feel glazed over and tired at the end, your body is an antenna and it's telling you, it's a feedback system saying, hey, wait a minute, that wasn't the right amount. That was too much consumption. So just like water or food are good for you, too much of it can kill you. So Instagram or all these different, I'm just using that as an example. It's not necessarily that it's toxic, it's how it's used. Yeah. And we know because of how we feel. If we overeat, we're in pain. Yeah. If we over Insta, we're not feeling so good.
Right.
And it's hard to get back online. So, using it in a flow state is a totally different thing. Same thing with the spreadsheets. The other part too is being able to trust, like when you would fall down into spreadsheetville, what you were doing was actually building out a huge amount inside of you. You needed a certain kind of discipline. You needed a certain kind of knowledge. You were building certain kind of logical and linear skills that you still do use, even though the way that you move now is much more based in feeling and instinct. But now when you need a spreadsheet, you know how to build one and you know how to really work it. And those are skills that are really valuable moving forward. So I think everybody's got a period. So we don't want to look back at that as a negative thing, and maybe it's going through school or maybe it's going through a developmental period. One of the leaders I'm working with now spent a lot of time developing out a lot of those parts of himself. And now he's really ready to, it's like he's established a certain foundation of confidence inside of the material world, kind of normal things. And now he's ready to dive in and do some really deep work and kind of deconstruct everything else that isn't working. But he's got that foundation that he's building from.
That's a great topic, because that's, being patient, essentially exercising patience and knowing that what you're doing right now is perfect, right?
Yeah.
So, because you can spend a lot of time on figuring out the purpose. What should I be doing? I feel like I should be doing something bigger. And you can be anxious. There can be anxiety around that and feeling like I'm not doing enough. Probably coming back to the I'm not enough, right?
Right.
But really just kind of anchoring into, what I'm doing right now is perfect. It's putting me, if it is getting you in the right direction, you likely, we need to build skills along the way and have certain experiences to help add to our tool belt, which will continue to help us go and achieve that higher purpose.
Yeah. And the journey's not usually a logical, linear one. When you talk with most people on how they got to where they are today, it's rarely the ladder that they thought they were going to climb with their career, or there's always something unseen that's going to come in. So we can predict that there's going to be unseen things moving forward and kind of unlock, because a lot of what people get, I think, paralyzed by in knowing how to live their purpose is it has to be perfect, and I need to know what it is right now, and I need to have full clarity. And when I hear that, I'm like, wait, stop the music. I think what we need is to let go of control. But that's one of the most terrifying things for people who are really driven and who are very successful. They're often the best at being in control. And that works to a point, and then they run out of rope. So when you see people kind of hit a plateau and, internally or in their career, a lot of the times it's because they can't control it anymore and they can't use their same tools anymore. So, it is a massive act of courage to step out and do a new paradigm and be willing to look deeper and let go of that control feeling, because it's what people think, holds their world together.
Yeah, you're going to plateau. If you need to control everything, you're absolutely going to plateau.
Yeah.
And some people plateau at a really high level. They get to a really high level by controlling everything in their life.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people at that point realize, all right, I need to release the control. They go through their own journey, their own spiritual awakeness, whatever they need to do to tap into their greater gifts and allow that to happen.
Yeah.
So that they can really, really start to do some big things in the world.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that are, like you mentioned, in that, where whether it's in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, or even your 60s, to where it's kind of that called midlife crisis moment where you kind of question, why was I doing all this? Was it doing it to please others? Was it doing it because it was comfortable, because I was able to control everything that I was doing?
Because it impressed other people?
Yeah. And there was certainty around it, because I
Right.
could map out where I was going with this thing.
Right.
But then realizing that, that's not their true gift. That's not where they're going to be truly fulfilled.
Yeah, because they've paved a road this way, but there's a gap, because actually their being, or what they're really here to do is wanting to pull a different direction.
Yeah.
So people are always going to hit a point, and it can be, the gap might be a present for them when they have a physical ailment come up, when they get fired from their job, when they don't get the job they wanted. It can be all these different things, or it could just be that nagging feeling inside of something isn't right.
Yeah.
Something isn't right. So at whatever point, that particular individual, we all have a different threshold and we all have a different story. When that gap gets to be so uncomfortable or too big, we decide to make some changes. And, if it's painful, sometimes that's what makes the motivation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And for my story was going through divorce.
Yeah.
It was shortly after we started working together that I started to look around and, then started paying more attention to my relationship and my marriage. And, we worked on that a bit, and it was just too far gone, right?
Yeah.
So that was the real big moment for me that really just shattered my world.
Yeah.
And had me thinking about things in a different way and questioning who I was, and really releasing control. Because up until that point, I had a entire career plan spreadsheet saying, all right, between now and when I'm 65, here's what I'm going to do, and here's the steps along the way. Right? Total control, right?
Yeah.
Needed to have certainty.
Right.
And I went from that to questioning everything and having no certainty and not knowing what next week was going to look like, let alone, the next 40 years.
Right.
And so that can be a scary place, but an incredibly powerful place and a powerful experience. You get to the point where you just have to surrender.
Yeah.
And say, okay, I don't know what's coming next. This is crazy, but okay, and it becomes more and more comfortable. But sticking with not trying to seek comfort all the time, not trying to seek comfort through numbing out with social media. For me, after a year after getting divorced, for a while it's on the dating apps, and that was my dopamine feed.
Yeah.
Right, I would be caught in that,
Right.
and then so whether it's that or Instagram or some people go and get and start drinking a lot to numb it out, eating a lot, shopping a lot. The Amazon shopping thing, that's just as much of an addictive dopamine hit as anything else. You get to do that, and then it shows up at your door.
Right.
A lot of that can be used to numb that out.
Yeah, totally. Versus, if you're having a moment where you're actually aching for something and you're wanting it fulfilled, give yourself the real nourishment. A lot of the times what we need is to go outside and play. Sounds really basic. Ask any kid, they know it's true.
Yeah.
Also, the way we've evolved as humans is not supposed to be, inside of the confines or, wired into these things that we're wired into. So, there's some really amazing things that people can do to reset themselves using a lot of technology or whatever. But I think the biggest thing is just get outside and play, move your body, get into your body. Because again, if we're in our bodies, then we're aligned with all of our feedback system, the neurofeedback or the biofeedback systems that are just naturally there. So from there, we can just make small course corrections. So for you had a really big, kind of like a smashing open event happen, and that's the way that your story went. But for some people, it'll just be the small steering and listening kind of in every moment. And I think for all of us, that's essentially what it will be. In the long run, we do have that small steering system.
Yeah,
Sometimes though, it's a little bit more like the red phoenix bursting into flames and being reborn again from its own ashes. That metaphor and that analogy. And I think those that are really the most courageous and really wanting to work an edge and really have a big appetite for all of this, being willing to just basically die and be reborn again inside of things. So, but just so that, people can catch the story, when you were going through your divorce process, you were still having this amazing, you held a really important role inside of an organization. You were still running everything that you were running, but it was more of an internal experience that you had.
Right.
But that's what led you to be where you are at today.
Right. And I was ready for it too.
Yeah.
Just to welcome it and say, you know what, I am going to surrender to the uncomfortable, and we're going to really make the most out of this. And stayed away. I actually drank less after that, and I was just trying to stay as conscious. That's when I first started doing yoga, started that practice and meditation. And if you lean into it, it can be a huge gift. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all continue to evolve and have our paths and the things that come up for us in life, and continuing to lean into the unknown, the uncertainty, in search of being able to realize our full potential.
Yeah.
And the impact that we can have on the world.
Yeah. Well, and the mind wants to think it's uncertain. And that's the trick. That's the trap of it, right? So the certainty actually lies within the knowing that's there for everybody inside of themselves. And that when you drop into the present moment, into the center of truly who you are, there's actually more certainty. But the brain and the ego freaks out. And so it's really just about dismantling that and not existing inside of that system. That's one operating system, but it's very limited, again, like we were saying. So when you're shifting over into this newer operating system that is massive, that feels and is unlimited, and can guide you, all the way that you need, and inside of that operating system exists all the resources you need. But when the brain freaks out and the ego starts to, go bonkers, yeah, it can feel super scary, but it's not. I mean, really and truly, it just seems like it.
Right.
The boogeyman kind of thing for a little kid, they can be terrified of what's in their closet, but it is just genuinely a shadow. So there's a lot that can get dismantled and very fast, very easily. And I think that you can definitely, you had your experience of that. Even though it was really scary, it can be really quick.
Yeah.
And actually, the more that you surrender into it and just have that sense of trust, trusting in that there's a bigger path, that there's a bigger play here, trusting in that your freedom is worth it.
Yeah.
It can be terrifying to walk outside of those bars. You can feel pretty naked out there in the world, not operating inside of the cell that you've always been inside of. But then what's true is that you're free.
Yeah, and I mean, and all of that led me to where I am today, and I'm incredibly grateful for where I am, and I appreciate your support to getting me here, and in advance, appreciate your support continuing going forward, and
Absolutely.
And us continuing to work together. So you mentioned the operating system a couple of times, and that's one of the things that you connected me with that had a huge impact and still does for me, is doing different things to really get that, honing that operating system within inside me. A lot of different biohacking methods that you've introduced to me. Neurofeedback, even just the products that Bulletproof creates, and through Bulletproof Coffee and all the different biohacks, and Dave's definitely a thought leader in that space, and following him. And but neurofeedback, explain a little bit about neurofeedback and why you even turned some people on to neurofeedback.
Yeah. So I didn't really know much about it myself for a lot of years. I'd heard about it, and then I had been briefly I had briefly introduced myself. I actually cold called Dr. Drew Pearson one day on the phone and asked him some questions, and I didn't really put it all together. And it was kind of I just put the whole thing on hold because then one of my sisters had a massive neurological accident, and I took her to neurologists. I took her to holistic neurologists, regular neurologists. I took her to all kinds of doctors, and they basically said, well, she's basically going to be disabled the rest of her life and living in hell. Wow. The best that you can do is give her anti-anxiety meds, but what she's having is a sensory overload problem. And so her brain was just going haywire. And so I connected the dots finally after a few weeks and brought her to see Dr. Drew Pearson, and it completely changed her life.
Wow. It
brought her back. So she was just in a really horrible spot and would not have been able to function as an adult in life. So
that was your first introduction.
That was my first introduction, was basically saving my sister's life. And I would have been her primary care provider, so that would have really changed my life as well.
Yeah.
So that was an eye opener. And then when I realized everything that was inside of there, Dr. Drew he's been a massive influence on my life. He was the first person that so he can measure what neurofeedback is. Let me back up and start there. Is measuring the EEG, so the electrical activity of the brain. So it's a functional scan understanding of what's going on in the brain. And we can basically understand a tremendous amount, about what is going on, about how somebody thinks, about what their gifts are, about what their challenges are. You can see somebody that's highly functioning and not realize that they have attention deficit or OCD or, that kind of a thing. But you can also understand what kind of potential that they have, how they are innately wired. So Dr. Drew is really a different human in that he understands. He's an extraordinary human.
He is.
He's a wizard.
He's a special man.
He is, and the way that he has utilized neurofeedback is taking it out of pathology, which is what most of the psychiatrists and the government and the military and all that, what they use it for is understanding pathology and kind of treating pathology, and he's using it to treat consciousness and to expand capacity. So expanding the capacity for insight, expanding the capacity for compassion, some of these amazing skill sets. So I've seen massive changes for myself with it, and I've also seen massive changes for people that, that I've seen go through his programs or work with him. It's been incredible.
Yeah. And so the program that he is running now, 40 Years of Zen, which he's been doing for 2 years now?
I think it's
maybe 3?
2 or 3. I lose track.
Okay.
Yeah.
That I've gone through, and I know you've gone through a couple of times, right? So talk about your experience, or what, either for yourself or what you've seen in others, of how that's helped them in their journey.
Yeah, I mean, 40 Years of Zen is it's another Dave Asprey company, and it's a neurofeedback intensive. So you go in and you do hours and hours of this a day, and then there's some really amazing debriefing and kind of a process that goes with it. And basically, you learn how to drop into that meditative state. I think Dave coined the term because it kind of replaces maybe what would take 40 years of meditation training, and you can kind of get a massive amount done in just a week. And then the changes actually grow neurologically for the next few months. Yes. Anytime we do neurofeedback, it's about 3 months to see at least 3 months to see the full benefit kind of take place as the neurons grow and connect. I mean, people have come back so radically different. Actually, my boyfriend went and did the program, and when he came back, we hadn't been dating, and when he came back, I'd seen him for the first time. It was about 3 or 4 months later. And he was so different than I had ever seen him before. It was incredible. It was like he was a different person. So
and then you said, okay, now I'm willing to date you.
Yeah. Well, now we're a match.
So it's a dating tool too.
Hey, whatever you want in life.
Go to 40 Years of Zen, and then you'll find your match.
Yeah. There's the unlimited benefits of this kind of work.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed for me in going through that program, and just the neurofeedback training that I did with Drew before he went up to Seattle to do that, was really getting a handle on my fight or flight response.
Yeah.
That was huge for me, because prior to that, I would struggle quite a bit with if something happened in a meeting that triggered me in some way. Like if I didn't know the answer to a certain question, or I felt like, if I felt like I wasn't good enough in some way, whatever those things can come up, then have that come up for me, I would then check out. It would be like my kind of flight response of being, in my head of, oh man, I can't believe that. I should have known that. I should have prepared more. And all of a sudden I'm not present to the world.
Right.
Well, that's what I noticed shortly after starting the training with Drew. Is I was in a situation just like that, where I went into my CEO, and he often liked to challenge me with things and ask me questions of things that he probably knew I didn't know. And he did that, and I didn't know. And I was able to almost see myself from above. Yeah. And say, okay, Brian, this is where often your flight response might come up, and you might feel like you're not good enough. Well, that's just not true. You don't need to do that. You can stay here, and you can be present. Everything's fine. Right. And I did that, and I walked out of the office, and I said, wow. Right. What just happened right there? Yeah. And that was my biggest aha. I would guess that's maybe 2 months into, maybe even less, into the neurofeedback training with Drew. So it's a very powerful tool.
Absolutely. Powerful. Yeah, because anybody, it doesn't matter how intelligent or capable, if they get triggered enough, basically the prefrontal cortex shuts down. The amygdala or other, there's other networks in the brain that get overactive, and they hog all the power. They hog all of the attention, the blood flow, everything. And so then what happens is that prefrontal cortex shuts down, and that is the part of us that makes us different than the rest of mammals. So when we're really triggered, we're basically as intelligent maybe as our dog, or any other kind of mammal that might be roaming around, which is kind of scary because often those are the people that are in a position of power, and they're maybe operating in a very animalistic way. So that's a lot of the behavior that we see. It gets translated out. Yeah. So being able to get out, get the context, get the perspective, not get triggered so far that you get down that wormhole and can't find your way back out. It keeps your bearings, and there's a lot of ways to get there. Neurofeedback is definitely one of the fast ways to get there, to change that.
So when you think about other types of hacks out there, what are a couple more that have been real powerful for you or you've seen in others?
Yeah, meditation. Exercise. I mean, those are the basic ones without having to go too far that everybody
those have been
can
around
afford.
For a long time.
Exactly. Because again, first and foremost, we're people. We're animals, and we need to take care of our bodies and inhabit them. So eating well, all those things, they seem really basic, they get overlooked, but they're absolutely essential for peak performance. And then there are things that can enhance sleep, it's very simple. There's a sleep induction mat that I was introduced to when I was working with Dave, and that has been really huge for me, being able to improve my sleep. And I use the Aura Ring for that. It's it captures metrics while you're sleeping. I know that there are other devices that do that. I like Aura personally because it doesn't radiate you with EMFs as you're sleeping, which I think is a really important function. Nice. Yeah. So, and it gives a lot of insight, and you can start to modify your behavior so that you're watching the data and the metrics for your sleep. Yeah. There's amazing things that happen with light and sound. Something that's important for people to know is that I was innately so, not innately, I was so locked down and in a control state. But when I started this journey a long time ago, that I was a massive skeptic. So when people were introducing me to light and sound, like I was introduced very early on in my career, basically right as I was starting my career, to a light and sound device that would actually help people to have a vision quest kind of journey, and put them in an altered state of consciousness almost every single time. I was very skeptical. I didn't believe in it. It's like, oh, how could this stuff, it sounds so fluffy. It sounds so, whatever. Don't you need a substance like a medication or something to do something? Shouldn't it be more dramatic than that? And the way that the body works and the way that growth really works is sometimes inside of the subtle sophistication. So it can be the applications of light and sound. Anytime people have the opportunity to experience those, I recommend experimenting with them.
Well, so what's an example of how you can experiment with light and sound?
So there's one way that's easy to apply is you can get some like glasses that have blinking lights inside of them.
Like
and
the
then
Mind
it has
Alive,
yeah,
David
Mind
Delight
Alive.
Pro. Yeah.
Or there's Mind Lights is another one that I like.
Okay.
I like the Mind Lights because I think it's the only one that I know of, at least, that connects wirelessly to your smartphone. So all you have to carry are a pair of glasses. So you can take it with you everywhere you go. Very easy to use. Yeah, and so there's the blinking of the lights, which obviously if anybody has seizures or anything like that, that's extremely dangerous. And actually for certain people, such as my sister, it would actually be also still really dangerous just because of sensory overload issue. So I don't want to be prescriptive here, but as far as what's worked for me, that's a really incredibly helpful tool. And then, there's usually some kind of sound technology. Maybe it's binaural beats or some other sort of technology that's worked into the music or sound.
Yeah, and that's why I have the David Delight Pro. You recommended it to me, and it's really cool. I mean, to get you in different brainwave frequencies and get into alpha state for meditation, get into theta for sleep. I use that quite a bit, and it has the lights, it has the binaural beats, but then it also has the electrodes.
Oh, you have
and the stimulus. Yeah, so all three, and it's it's been powerful. It's been fun.
Yeah.
So and you talked a little bit about some of the things that you've dealt with, because you have crazy gifts, right? So you have these innate gifts that you came into this world with. But I know you've mentioned that for a long time in your life you didn't realize that you had this. It showed up in different ways of overstimulus and that kind of thing. But you're a very unique person, and so talk about how that's been for you to have those gifts and what you've done to really hone those things. And
it's really the origin story of how I can even do what I do now. I've had to develop and cultivate and find my own freedom and break through a lot of illusion along the way and overcome a ton. And I had a lot of pretty intense physical challenges. I didn't know what it was like to be well until I was almost maybe 30 years old. So it was a really massive thing, every day not feeling well. Imagine the feeling of jet lag or having a really bad head cold or some kind of combination of those two, plus other things, miscellaneous other systems of my body were not working right. So I thought of myself as sick and broken in a certain way. And then when, if you have a head cold or jet lag, you also don't feel very mentally acute. You're not very sharp. So I thought I was also not very intelligent. And I had to work really hard for my grades. And I, just kind of struggled with memory and different things like that. But really underneath or behind the scenes, what was running all of that was low-grade trauma, being told that I was something different, much smaller than actually what I am, not understanding who I am, not even knowing that it was safe to go into that exploration. So really my process of physical healing and uncovering my just basic senses, I'd say, was just through the process of my own spiritual and emotional journey. It was a lot of bog. So when I say come into your own body, I was very dissociated and I didn't have access to myself. So how could I know who I was and how could I be at my full strength? But then as I was coming into more and more of it, that's one of the things that when I realized when I was doing the neurofeedback work, is that I'm actually a lot of standard deviations outside of normal on a lot of different things. So, and I had no idea because again, I thought I was kind of broken and defective.
So the mind mapping, the EEG came back and
Right.
told you a lot.
And Drew's like, whoa, wait, what's all this? And again and again. And as technology with EEG technology moves forward, the ability to measure the brain, we've just found more and more layers of what makes my brain really different. So it's interesting, it's fascinating. I never knew what it was like to be me back when I was sick and feeling broken. And also I don't really know what it's like not to be me now because that's how consciousness works. It's perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But one of the things that helps me to understand is evolution and how much is possible and to be able to see through all of what may present. Somebody might look really not so great, but it's my job and also my ability. And I think we can all be challenged with this to challenge ourselves to see the truth of who someone is and what's possible for them and give them the opportunity to rise to it. Because transformation can be just, it's radical.
I just want to, again, express my appreciation for you.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing for me and so many others is so powerful in shifting the energy of the world. And I just can't express gratitude, appreciation for how you've been there to support me. You're always there to help prop up and support others.
Yeah.
And the dedication that you have to honing your gifts so that you can do that in an increasing way in the world is very inspiring. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that acknowledgement, and thanks for trusting and being courageous enough to take the journey. You're an incredible human.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great having you.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back again soon.
Sounds
We
good.
could have talked for 3 more hours.
I think so. Easily.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank
Thanks.
you. All right. Bye.
Bye.